Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we read through St. Faustina's diary. Join me, Amy Thomas, each day for a short reading out of the diary which brought us a deeper understanding of Christ's divine mercy. Hello, Catholic pilgrims, and welcome to day 332 of our readings from St. Faustina's diary. The other day I was reading about St. Rose de Cusney. I think I'm saying her name right. She was a French nun, and she actually came over to the United States, and she did a lot of work here in the United States, especially in the middle of the country. She was in St. Louis. She was actually in Kansas for a while, helping with the Native Americans, and she just was very prolific in setting up a lot of hospitals and orphanages and schools for the Native Americans, and it was quite impressive. Anyway, towards the end of her life, she was very sick for many years, and at the end of her life, there were years where she was basically all alone. She was suffering, she was sick, and she kind of lived in like a Harry Potter style room in the house that she lived in with other sisters, basically like under the stairwell. And she was pretty much left completely alone. And I can only imagine what her suffering must have been like. It's really hard to suffer at all, and it's doubly hard to suffer all alone. So that's what we're going to talk about today in Notebook 6, numbers 1647 through 1651. April 1st, 1938. Once again, I am feeling worse today. A high fever is beginning to consume me, and I cannot take any food. I would like to have something refreshing to drink, but there is not even any water in my pitcher. All this, O Jesus, to obtain mercy for souls. Just as I was renewing my intention with greater love, one of the novices came in and gave me a big orange, which had been sent by the directress of novices, Sister Callista. I saw the Lord's hand in this. The same thing happened again several times. During this time, although my needs were known, I never received anything refreshing to eat, even though I had asked for it. However, I knew that God was demanding suffering and sacrifices. I am not writing in detail about these refusals, because these are delicate matters, and it is difficult to believe. Yet God can demand even such sacrifices. I was about to ask Mother Superior Irene to allow me to have something in my cell with which to quench my great thirst, but before I managed to ask, Mother herself began to speak. "Sister, let's make an end of this illness once and for all, one way or another. You'll have to undergo regular treatment or something. Things can't go on like this any longer." A little later, when I was alone, I said, "Christ, what am I to do? Am I to ask you for health or for death?" I had no clear command, so I knelt down and said, "May your holy will be done in my regard. Do with me, Jesus, as you please." At that very moment, I felt as though I were all alone, and various temptations attacked me. But I found peace and light in earnest prayer, and understood that the Superior only wished to test me. I don't know how this happens, but the room in which I have been lying has been very much neglected. Sometimes it has not been cleaned for more than 2 weeks. Often, no one would light a fire in the stove, and so my cough would get worse. Sometimes I would ask to have a fire lit, and at other times I did not have the courage to ask. On one occasion, when Mother Superior Irene came to see me and asked me if perhaps it was necessary to heat the room more, I said, "No, because it was already getting warmer outside and we had the window open." First Friday. When I took the Messenger of the Sacred Heart into my hand and read the account of the canonization of St. Andrew Bobola, my soul was instantly filled with a great longing that our congregation too might have a saint, and I wept like a child that there was no saint in our midst. And I said to the Lord, "I know your generosity, and yet it seems to me that you are less generous towards us." And I began again to weep like a little child. And the Lord Jesus said to me, "Don't cry. You are that saint." Then the light of God inundated my soul, and I was given to know how much I was to suffer. And I said to the Lord, how will that come about? You have been speaking to me about another congregation. And the Lord answered, it is not for you to know how this will come about. Your duty is to be faithful to my grace and to do always what is within your power and what obedience allows you to do. Today, one of the sisters came into my room and said that such and such a sister was very fussy over her own illness, and that she found this very annoying and would gladly give her a piece of her mind, were it not for the fact that she was not a member of this convent. I answered that I was surprised that she should think in such a way. Sister, just think of how many sleepless nights this sick sister has been through, and of how many tears. The sister then came to think differently. My maternal grandparents lived in this teeny tiny Kansas town in southeast Kansas. I mean, there was probably 300 people in the town, and I was probably related to half of them, it seems like. Anyway, my grandmother would often have me and my cousin go visit different houses. And one house that we would always go and visit was my great-grandmother's, so my grandmother's mom. And that was no big deal. We loved going down to her house to visit with her for a little while because she would always stuff our pockets either with fruit or candy or something. And, it was a family member, so it seemed very natural. But then there were other times when my grandma would come in and she would say, Amy and Linda, I need you to go to this person's house. And she would always have like a plate of cookies or a pie or a dinner or something like that. And we were young, I would say between the ages of 7 and 11, maybe. And, it was, not something that we really pondered on, but we were always like, why is Grandma always sending us off to visit with these people? And she would always send the two of us. So I remember one house very distinctly. It sat on a corner. The roads at that time were all just like gravel dirt roads. And it was kind of a scary house. It was 2-story, very dark. Looked like nobody had turned the lights on in a very long time. And there was this old woman that lived in there. And whenever we would go in that house, it was like really stepping back in time. It was like going back to the beginning of the 1900s. All the furniture was very old. The curtains were very dark and old. The antique things lying around were very dark and old. She never turned on the lights. It was very weird. And the house was just very dark. Like the colors were dark and the drapes were dark and there wasn't a lot of sunlight. And my grandma would always have something for us to give her. And she was this little old lady. And she would be so happy for us to be there. And she would want to ask me and my cousin all kinds of questions. And she'd want to offer us food and drink. And, we always just kind of wanted to get out of there because it was weird. And I kind of felt like the house was like a haunted house. And I didn't recognize at the time that this woman was very lonely. But we would hang around and answer her questions and tell her about school and what, musical instruments we played and stuff like that. Then there was another woman in town that my grandma would send us to, and she lived not far from that house. And we would go there and she would do the same thing. She would be so happy to see us. And she would want to feed us and have us sit down and visit with her. And again, as young kids, we just want to get out of there and go play. But we always stayed because our grandma told us that we needed to stay for a little while and talk with her. And so we would, and we were always polite and nice and everything. And my grandmother also would sometimes take us down to the nursing home that she worked at. And I remember this one lady very distinctly. She was so excited for me and my cousin to be there. Just so excited. She basically ran to her room because she wanted to set it up so we could come and visit. And, we walked in her room and she was just beside herself with joy that we were there. And, at the time, I didn't understand what my grandmother was doing. And in my head, it was a little bit like torture, but, I went along with it. My grandma told me we needed to do it. I knew I could sense that these women were very lonely. And the one woman at the nursing home, she would just go on and on and on about how we were just like her granddaughters and everything. And she just would want us to spend the night. And I, in my head, was like, oh my gosh, no, please. But now, as a grown woman, I look back and I see exactly what my grandmother was doing. She knew that these women were all alone, suffering. They're probably all widows. And she knew that young girls would come and just light up their lives, and to bring them some food and to just spend a short amount of time with them would be like the joy of their month, really. And it's so admirable what my grandmother was doing. And I look here at what Sister Faustina is going through. She's very sick. None of those ladies that we went to see were like sick, lying in bed, but they were suffering in some way. I can see that now looking back. But, Sister Faustina is suffering here. She's lying in bed. Nobody's really coming to really care for her. I mean, it's weeks till her room is even cleaned. It's neglected. She doesn't get fires lit. No one's just really coming to be with her. And it's sad. There are so many people out there that are suffering just like Sister Faustina, all alone, wishing that someone would just come and be with them and kind of share in their suffering or alleviate it just a little bit. And so it's something that we really have to pay attention to. I know our lives are so busy, and my grandmother lived in a different time where usually the mothers stayed home. And we look down upon that because, we need to get out and we need to work. But when women would stay home, they took care of the community. That was their job. Because they weren't working full-time jobs, they had a read on what was going on in the community. They knew who was widowed. They knew who was sick. They knew who was suffering. They knew who had a baby. They knew all these things. And so they knew that it was their job and their duty to take care of those in their community. And we've lost that. We really have lost that, which is such a tragedy because we look down on, women that stay home as if they're not doing anything. And I think of all the things that my grandmothers did when they were, quote unquote, stay-at-home moms. They were constantly doing stuff to make sure that the community was taken care of. And everybody was connected because of the women that stayed home. And it was truly a beautiful thing. So just reading through what Sister Faustina is going through, your heart kind of goes out to her. She is offering these sufferings up for sinners and for people's souls, but not everybody realizes or knows to do that. And so they're just suffering miserably without any real purpose behind it. And so it really is our job to go in and alleviate their suffering by even just giving them a few minutes of our time. Just something to think about. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I will see you back here for day 333. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.